they didn't really have any pass rushers. There weren't that many guys you looked to really beyond Keon White after they traded Joshua Uche and said, that's a guy you can trust to get after the quarterback. Now Ngakoue comes in, not expecting him to totally replace Matthew Judon, but I like the signing. He's only 29 years old. He was, wasn't flashing with the Ravens, but he was able to make some plays. I don't know that he changes everything, but I am kind of expecting to notice his impact this Sunday against the Rams. How do you feel about his addition and his presence this week?
I think we're going to see more from him than maybe we initially expected. And part of that look is just from a personnel perspective. I don't think Dietrich Wise is going to play. We're still, an hour or so away from the injury report, but not having practiced, really all week. And also, too, to your point, they really don't have, outside of Keon White, they don't have a quote-unquote pass rusher here on this roster anymore. Maybe an exterior, kind of an edge guy, an edge presence. As we sit here right now, we don't know what's going to happen with Christian Barmore going into this weekend. Gerard Mayo, kind of opened the door and said, well, maybe he's going to play a little bit. But I think, and this is something that both Covington and Mayo said, you need to manage expectations with him, at least initially. So I wouldn't count on a whole lot this weekend. But yeah, this is a sneaky important area of need for this team because, as you mentioned, they lost Judon. They traded away Uche. Barmore has been out of the mix all season. I'm not saying that this rises to the level of, left tackle or wide receiver depth, but I wouldn't be surprised to see the Patriots. And again, some of it depends on free agency, but I wouldn't be surprised to see the Patriots prioritize, an edge guy in the offseason. I think Ngakoue brings a lot to the table. And I think we talked about this in the locker room the other day. He didn't sound like a guy who was a one and done guy. I think, on the surface, you see a guy who played for 7 teams in 9 years, never really truly found a home, went back to Baltimore before he was waived by them. This is a guy who I think you could not build around, but could be an important guy when it comes to creating a culture in your locker room. This is a veteran. Yeah. This is a well-respected guy. It's clear, talking to some of the guys in the locker room, this is a well-respected guy. So I'm going to be interested to see, not just this year, not just this week, but his potential role on this roster moving forward.
Yeah, it's a good point. I look at it as, the high-level bridge guy, potentially. You give him, a 2-year contract. And we're getting way ahead of ourselves here. He hasn't even played a game, but the buy-in did jump out. Like that, and it was a big question when they claimed it. Was like, is he going to be a problem in the locker room? A guy that's only here for a couple months, is looking ahead to free agency. He seems fully engaged. And if he is engaged and he is giving you something, they need, like you said, multiple pass rushers this offseason. And if you can check that box, and maybe he's not your Matthew Judon, maybe he's not your lead guy, you go out and get somebody else, but maybe he's your Joshua Uche. Maybe he's that secondary guy, and then adds that veteran leadership thing. That would be a good fit, I will say, for the people that are more interested in that lead edge guy. Georgia, Tennessee this weekend, James Pierce, Michael Williams, 2 first-round picks on the field. Check that out. You mentioned Christian Barmore, though, too. And Gerard Mayo said today, like you said, there is no expectation. That is the expectation. There is no expectation. He's obviously been through a lot medically. There was some thought that he may never get on the field again. Here he is just a few months later, like within the same season. I'm not expecting to see him Sunday, just having only practiced one day. If he does play, like you said, super limited. But do you think there's a chance we see him this year? And how much can he truly add to the defense at this point?
Yeah, I do think that he plays this year. I don't know how many snaps he's going to get moving forward. I don't know if we're going to reach a point in December or January where he's playing, 60, 70% of the snaps. But just to be able to get back on the field after what he's gone through, I think says an awful lot about him and his ability to kind of persevere through what had to be a very difficult process. We both know guys on IR, it's a weird situation. You're kind of in limbo. You're on the team, but you're not really on the team. And it feels like Mayo did everything he could to kind of wrap his arms around him metaphorically and say, look, we still want you around here. Yeah, I do. I think he's going to play this year. I think he's going to play this year. I think the real impact will be for him in 2025. I think he just wants to the expectation for me is that I think he just wants to get his legs underneath him. And I think he wants to be able to get back to something resembling normalcy for a football player. And if he can lay that foundation, lay that base, kind of treat the rest of this year like a modified preseason, for lack of a better term, and just get back out there and hit and get hit, then I think he's setting himself up very nicely for 2025 and beyond. This is a guy who's a real impact guy. We saw this guy at the end of the year last year. I talked to Richard Seymour about him, and Richard Seymour was just effusive in his praise of this young man. So I think that there's a little bit of Seymour there, and I'm real cautious about that. The size, right, the ability to hold up against the run, and also deliver some real pressure against, along the interior there. Yeah, look, he's going to be an important part of what they want to do defensively moving forward. And I think that, he will continue to kind of ramp up over the course of the rest of this year with an eye maybe toward 2025 and beyond.
I go back to 2020 when they drafted Cameron McGrone, and it's not exactly apples to apples, but they drafted Cameron McGrone in the 5th round, Joshua Bledsoe as well. McGrone was coming off a torn ACL. Bledsoe hurt his wrist in the pre-draft process. So they both started the year on IR, and the team ended up activating them. It was December, or designating them to return. Didn't activate them and ran out the clock, but designated them to return so they could get that 3 weeks of practice and get that experience. So they weren't coming into their sophomore season totally raw. Now, Christian Barmore's obviously played in the league, and the fact that they activated him as early as they did tells me that, there's a better chance he plays, especially when you look at the timeline. They have 3 weeks to activate him, but that 3rd week is the bye week. So he essentially can have a full month of practice without having to play in a game, if that's the route they want to take, if they don't activate him sooner. So, I think the plan is for him to play, but it would, there's a similar thought pattern behind that. Like you said, modified preseason, where next year he's not going back out there for the first time week 1 and having to get his legs under him. He's already played a couple games. He already feels comfortable, and they could use him because we've talked about the pass rush issues. And look, you need a pass rush off the edge. You need a pass rush against the tackle. That's not who he is, but interior pressure can blow plays up like nothing else. And to get him back in that role, I think would be incredibly beneficial.